electricity and you keep it in dimmed status. We are building transmission lines worth almost $1.5 billion now, which are ongoing. We shall need another, say, $2 billion to complete the transmission of what we have now. And then, but as we do that, we are saying, and I think Andrew has heard the president saying it before, we shouldn't be comfortable. We should generate more electricity. And we are now expanding the mix, the energy mix. Not only the hydro, but also look at other sources which are renewable in nature, but also have energy security even in the relatively dirty one. Because the decarbonization agenda in the world will require that those who have renewable energy are likely to attract more investments. Because unlike in the period when farms, when plants, factories could use dirty energy, now industries are required to use clean energy. And in that, unlike dirty energy, you can't transport clean energy. Dirty energy, they could get the petroleum, they could get coal and put it in a container and ship it to anywhere in the world. And the unit cost of shipping it was very low. With the renewable energy, you must relocate and go where it is. So in our strategic thinking, we are saying we stand a good chance if we could do, as we deal with now the survival we have dealt with, and now strategically invest in more megawatts of energy to expand renewable energy stock. And we shall be able to attract a lot of these plants which are likely to relocate, because not many countries have these sources of renewable energy. But we had to start with transmitting the 2,000 megawatts which we have, ensuring that they go mainly to the growth centers, not everywhere. Because also some people were saying, no, take electricity to every point in the country. It's very expensive to do so, and when there is no good return, when you are just using it to catch grasshopper or to just light up a few things, goats, and so you will not be able to pay for it. So we are starting with the growth centers where we are likely to put industrial parks, build those substations, and ensure that they get energy. The railway, you have heard that we have started the construction of the standard gauge railway. This is a landlocked country. There is no debate you can have on is that railway viable or what. I have heard also some people are doing that in a landlocked country, which is 800 miles away from the sea. You have inefficient railway system, the meter gauge. Somebody saying, you repair that and be on that one. Come on, you are not likely really to attract any competitive investor somewhere to come, and you are locked in the land of Kenya and Tanzania, and you don't have an evacuation plan. So we are building the SGR. We are starting. We have already deployed the first the disbursement of money, and all the equipment at sea to come and start the construction. Then we work on also a number of critical roads, the road network, to ensure that the country is connected. We've had to deal with so many plates at the same time, but we are very, very deliberate on it. As also, we build a few of our air transport system, a few airport, upgrade our small airport, get other airports also online, ensure that the one in Hoima is completed, ensure that we get a few other regional airports. We are going to start the one in Igulu to expand it to an international status, to be able to handle at least a Boeing 777 there. the one in Chidepo, and a few others in southwestern Uganda and so on. Do the same when it comes to digital transformation. Ensure that our cable system is upgraded, and so that the internet speed can increase and the cost of internet goes down. So in other words, there are those enablers that we are saying we are putting money in. That's why the budget he can tell you where the money is in the budget to approve. Honorable Mara is targeting those areas which we feel should be done in order to achieve what Andrew is talking about. But it will be a marathon. I want to assure every Ugandan it's not going to be a sprint. That's not how they transform economies. That's why we give ourselves leg room of about a decade or a decade and a half for us to be able now to kickstart the transformation agenda.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kintu, let me come to you. When you hear what the PSST speaks about, but there's also money that someone writes a message here and says, I have had an experience with SME operators where I supplied, I do not want to mention the government agency, to a tune of 143 million. It took me 6 months to recover the money, but I was slapped with a tax, to be a penalty to be able to pay. There is that money, that government is borrowing money from the domestic space. The private player is doing the same. How do we safeguard the entrepreneurial class, especially government borrowing, government not paying, but they also need to make their businesses thrive?
Thank you. Now, sometimes it looks like the private entities are in competition with government. Yeah? So, if you're going to help us, first of all, government is one entity that has the ability to pay small enterprises. It does not pay on time. Now, when we borrow from the same source, it makes the cost of borrowing for us in private business so high. And yet it stopped, or sometimes it stops giving us business. You know, government would help us by giving us business. The small businesses that need not to be handled by foreign companies should come to us. Yes, they put a provision that beyond or below this threshold of business money can be done by small enterprises. But then some time back, about 3 years back, you had, I think it was the Minister of Finance, giving guidance to departments to stop, for example, or to forward all forms of printing and branding work to Uganda, is it what? Uganda
UPPS.
Printing and Publishing Corporation. So in that case, is government helping small enterprises? Yeah? There are some businesses which it shouldn't go into. Some of them are so small. Let it do the ones that we cannot do actually. Yeah? And we do the small ones, let them do the big ones that involve millions of dollars that we may not have the equipment, the necessary capacity to execute. So when you talk of, what did he say? He said that he was not paid by, you know.
It took 6 months for him to be paid.
To be paid by which institution?
Let's leave the institution out, but it's a government agency.
Okay, fine. So that is the disservice that they do to us. By the way, even big corporate companies here in Uganda, which are not necessarily government, almost don't want to give small enterprises work. I have interfaced with many. They are interested in lending us money and giving them back what? Interest. But even their small pieces of work, you see, a large corporation can have several pieces of work, some of which are small, under 50 million, 100 million, yeah? Which an individual at Nasa Road or anywhere can actually execute. They still don't give it to you. But when they give you, they want to give you loans, they will ask for all the things. But when you provide them for them to give you work, they do not support you. I have interfaced with many who actually tell it to you that on such work we cannot deal with you small people. So now what kind of economy are we running? Because government is saying it is grooming us, the small enterprises, so that we grow from micro, small, into medium. How shall we get there when we have never gotten a business of even 20 million, when it is so hard for us to get a small business from government institutions? And there is a lot of middleman economy, even in government offices here. Procurement officers are like middlemen. While procurement can be online, such that you would have a feeling that once I put in all my paperwork, my experience, and everything they need, that the selection is going to be not really dependent on the individual who is the procurement officer, but it will still not happen. The procurement officer is another middleman, a big block for small enterprises. Because we do not have the means and the regulations are stifling. I was at one business conference where a serious businessman, whose name I will not mention, in Uganda, is stifled by these complexities in regulations. You go to UNBS, it had better come out clear that for us to visit your site, to give you a certificate to start producing goods ABCD, if you're in Wachiso, Kampala, pay this amount of currency points so that we come. And this was a big man who actually is able. Then how about the small, the medium? For us in small and micro, actually we need a favorable and transparent regulations to be able to work. Sometimes it is not about money. That is why the death rate of enterprises in Uganda is 46%. And of the 46% that survive in the first 5 years, only 18 or thereabout will survive the next years after. So the cause is not only finances, as so many people put it, because our national entrepreneurial index is actually high, is fair enough. We have the willingness, the attitude is good. Of course, the regulations, like she mentioned, the registration and so on, some of it is crippling, some of it is unnecessary. You've just started the business. It can even take a year or more to make you just even $500. Yeah? You see here, we need a relationship. We are supposed to have a relationship with URA. Every time it's not come to enforce, sometimes it is not necessary for you to come and close me down. There is a way in which you're supposed to help me so that I move on and I eventually will pay the what? The taxes. So these regulatory complexities, you know, that is why when you ask people their income, they do not mention because they think you're coming after them. Go downtown here. If you tell them that, for example, you're going to have an official from URA to come and educate us on ABCD, or an official from Tax Appeals Tribunal to come and tell us about this and this, most of the time they will run away. They will not attend because they have put an image of simply like stifling business, small businesses. For me, I'm in total agreement with PDM because I've interfaced with people who have zero income. Yeah? And a million is like a miracle to them. And to me, like he said, it takes time because probably like maybe sometime when you reach a certain level, you tend to forget the lives of those who are at zero or in negatives. So that's why you may think 1 million in PDM may not be as useful. But as time goes on, like he said, education and financial help, the countryside will transform. People will transform. Those in agriculture will transform, and later they'll get the appetite to enter into bigger business as their ability and funds grow.
Okay.
So, and then there is another small distinction I wanted to make. You talk of entrepreneurs, our strength, you know, and how do we take charge of our economy. Like I've said, if the death rate is 46% of businesses, that means we are good at identifying opportunities, starting the idea. Along the way, in between there is where our problem is. We are strong on starting. And also those figures do not show us the necessary entrepreneurs. In Uganda, there are many. The figures that come out of the entrepreneurial index do not even show us. Okay, that is supposed to show what government is putting in to help us. But they do not show us of the businesses that die in less than 5 years. How many of those were necessary entrepreneurs? In Uganda, it is almost more attractive to have a job than to enter entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a tug of war. In Uganda, it's a real battle. It's a hustle. You know, you have everyone running after you the moment you open shop like this. KCC is knocking, URA is knocking, the garbage collector is knocking. Everyone is knocking at your door. The landlord is knocking. So some necessary entrepreneurs are such that he's operating a small shop, but the moment a job comes, or he's looking for a job while operating this shop, 2 years, 1 year, he gets a job, he runs away. Then you guys come and collect how many businesses failed, What were the reasons? You may not mention. But most of them are necessary entrepreneurs. They keep running away because, and you may find businesses in Uganda that are owned by people who are still in government or working in NGOs or companies, actually thrive better because they have a backing, a sort of backing. They have a leverage. Sorry to say this, government people who have businesses, those businesses are doing well because, first of all, he has the leverage of using a personal car to go and supervise his business. Just to mention. He can also access a loan, of course. There are so many benefits that he can use to actually enhance his work. But if it is a pure entrepreneur 311 who does not have such privileges, I tell you in Uganda, a job is more appetizing than starting an enterprise.
Thank you. Andrew, PSST mentioned beautiful things, PDM, what impact. Fortunately, I also am grateful that at least he has spoken about technology and how he can be able to track that even on his own computer there. But we have a bust of a population that is between 18 and 30, that is about 10.2 million there. As a country, we talk oil, we talk gold, we talk coffee. What is our comparative advantage as an economy, first and foremost? Secondly, all this money, 71 trillion, come the next financial year. Where can we put our money and begin to see short-term, medium-term, and long-term benefits?
That question is quite loaded. So let me begin from the end. First, there is no 71 trillion in the budget. If I'm not mistaken, what is the actual money the government is going to spend? If you remove rolled over debt and interest payments.
About 46 trillion.
About 46 trillion.
Yeah.
So a lot of that money you see in the budget, some of it is debt that is being rolled over. The other are interest payments
and statutory obligations
on government loans. So if you take those, there's certain money that is fixed, can't do anything. The actual money that the government is going to spend in the economy, whether on roads, on whatever it is, teacher salaries and stuff like that, could be about 46 trillion.
Yeah.
Now, I think that there is a philosophical and ideological difference between me and my grandson Ramadan on PDM. And I'll explain it in two ways. Because I know there is a school of thought, which he may belong to, that the best way to stimulate agriculture is direct interventions to provide credit to farmers in order to induce them to enter the money economy. Now, my view of structural transformation is based on a historic record. How, first of all, remember that the countries that developed first, so you say countries like Britain and Netherlands and others, never planned development. It came by what you would call accident or by chance, in the sense that the European monarchs had to fight wars abroad in order to ensure security at home, because Europe was so fragmented. If you look at China, it's larger than Western Europe, it's one country. But Europe is a small place, the size of Congo. It's how many? 28 countries. So they had to fight wars abroad in order to ensure security at home. Now, wars could pay for themselves through loot, or what you call booty, historically. The challenge that emerged within Europe is that laws became long and costly. You have heard of the 30 Years' War. Became long and costly. So they put a lot of strain on the fiscal resources of the state, by the financial resources of the state. So, and paid soldiers could march back onto the capital and overthrow the king. So European monarchs had to find ways to raise money to fight these wars. Often they had either to raise the money two ways. Either they would have to tax the citizens, and or, because they could do both, they had to borrow from them. That meant that monarchs now became dependent on their own citizens for their own survival. So they had to build political institutions and put in place public policies to encourage increased productivity by their citizens. And who are these citizens from whom they borrowed and whom they taxed? Largely the rich. Industrialists, merchants, and stuff like that. But in a modern economy which was already transiting from fixed capital to mobile assets that are the biggest source of revenue, you see, if you have land, it's a fixed asset. You can't hide land. Somebody will come and tax it. But as more revenues came from movable, there is a book by a guy called something Mitchell, Thomas Mitchell. It's called Taxation in Medieval England. It's an incredible piece of work on the shift from taxing land to taxing these movable assets, which could easily be hidden. The only way you could increase your tax returns is through the cooperation of the owner of those assets, because they could easily be hidden, whether it was oxen, machinery, whatever it was. And that meant their cooperation. So the desires of monarchs to negotiate with the citizens for revenues led to the creation of parliaments. These became institutions through which the state negotiated with the private citizens on policies to increase their productivity so that it can get more revenue from them. Now, remember that parliaments initially were assemblies of the rich. The idea of universal adult suffrage, or that you go to, is not even 150 years old. Nowhere in Europe. When Europe is beginning the industrial transformation, industrialization, or the Industrial Revolution, only a few propertied people voted. But the election of parliaments were assemblies where the monarch would negotiate. What do parliaments do? They do two things. They decide the budget and they decide on borrowing. They decide on taxes. In American Revolution, no taxation without representation. The other, they also decide on borrowing. If you're going to borrow from us, we must put a limit on how you're going to spend this money. That is it. Now, these rich people had a lot of power. I should tell you, it's difficult to find a country, and maybe Ramadan, you should help me find one, where there was no impoverishment of people in agriculture to drive industry. Because what happens if you see Britain, you can even read China today or South Korea yesterday. In all of them, I'm going to remove countries like Ireland and Singapore, which are special cases. But for most of these countries, they needed to set the manufacturing ball rolling. To set it rolling, they had to create substandard wages in industry to make industry competitive. Manufacturing is very uncompetitive area. The only way they made it competitive is by impoverishing agriculture so that people can live agriculture. When everybody left a piece of land, it meant that a highly educated man and intelligent one like Gobi, my grandson Daniel here, Omara and Sarah there, they could now go. You know, like in Uganda, people are cutting small pieces of land. I see the president preaching to them, don't subdivide your land. He is making the wrong message. These people they call land grabbers are agents of transformation. If you have to think about it, because if you get so many plots of land and make them into one, then you can allow machinery to be employed on those pieces of land. Then you have large-scale agriculture. If you cannot have large-scale agriculture, you can have high-intensive agriculture. You see Netherlands, on 1 hectare of land, I have a friend in Kasese there, a gentleman in Kasese. These people produce, what is it called? Hemp. They produce...
Cocoa?
No, hemp and for medical marijuana. He has and people here are disturbing him. We'll discuss another day. But on 1 acre or 2 acres of land, I can't remember, it's a very short, whatever, he produces 3 tons of tomatoes. 3 tons of tomatoes per day on about 5 acres of land. It's incredible, these greenhouses, what they can do. So, for people like that to go into agriculture, if you produce that volume of tomatoes, where do you put them? There must be processing facilities. There must, in Uganda, if you incentivize farmers to produce a lot of agriculture, where would you sell it? Because to export these agricultural products outside of our region here to these large markets requires sanitary standards. They require standardization. They require these are so many things that an ordinary peasant, if you give him 1 million shillings, cannot do. So for me, if I was the one, so this is why my philosophical difference with Ramadan and General Salim Saleh, with whom we have argued this issue of PDM, is I don't believe that because Andrew Mwenda is not in the money economy, to put him in the money economy, I send him 1 million shillings. I don't believe so. Let me give how the British tried when they came to Uganda to bring Ugandans into the cash economy, right? They found my people, for us, we are cattle keepers. We call ourselves Bahuma, there in the Toro. My grandparents, great-grandparents, were cattle keepers. And they saw cattle as a source of wealth. They do not need wealth from anywhere else. But Muzungu wanted to plant cotton, coffee, tea, and things like that. So how are you going to incentivize a person already self-sustaining with his cattle or with his agricultural plantation to go and plant your coffee? They introduced something called a graduated tax. The graduated tax requires you to have money to pay at the end of the month. So your cows are not going to give you money because they're subsistence. So you had to plant coffee or cotton, because that's why in primary they taught us these were cash crops. Today maize is a cash crop. Every crop in Uganda is a cash crop. But those days the cash crops were cotton, tobacco, tea, and coffee. because it is only through them that you get cash. And to create demand for cash, they created a head tax, what they call a graduated tax. And the total value of a graduated tax at that time was the value of a big he got, which today would be about 350,000. So an ordinary person had to pay that amount of money. So they were forced to leave either their cows or supplement their cows with coffee and cotton. That was what we call economic coercion. You are really coercing me. The other possible, we can discuss what incentives would you put in place to draw people from subsistence into commercial farming. There is a gentleman called James Scott. So at Yale University he died, but he wrote 3 great books. One is The Moral Economy of the Peasant, Rebellion and Subsistence in Southeast Asia. I think it is classic, 1975. Studies of East Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Burma, all those countries, attempts by the state to promote commercialization of agriculture using peasants and the failures of it. The second book he wrote is called Weapons of the Weak. It is to show how the peasants resist plans by the Ramadans, the state. The third book is Seeing Like a State. It is to show how states really look at things very different from ordinary people and what they do. But if you read the works, and these works begin from 1975 and his last book, Seeing Like a State, in 2005 or something. But if you read his works, it is there to demonstrate the futility of programs, because PDM is not new. Museveni started with something in 1996 called the Kulembeka. Then there was, Uganda has had many programs of this type. Modernization of agriculture. The first was Entandikwa. Then there was a plan for modernization of agriculture. Then there was Bonabagagawale, right? Then there was, but there, Myoga, whatever. These programs have been there. PDM is not new. And I don't see how much they have transformed agriculture, because up until last year, we're still 70% peasantry. So, Ramadan, I am not optimistic about PDM. What I am optimistic about, and this is why I will come, you see, Ramadan has stated a series of things, how government is allocating money. They're brilliant. Do infrastructure. He talked about the railway. He talked about do roads. He talked about digital transformation. Brilliant. And the government of Uganda is very good at things like this. For me, issue is implementation efficiency and effectiveness. I'll give you an example. When Alan Kajenda was appointed, let me finish. Was appointed the executive director of Junra, she called me to chair the investor conference, or the investor roundtable on the Jinja-Kampala Expressway. It takes 3 weeks from Kampala to Jinja. It used to take us 30 minutes. Now 3 weeks. Broken road, congested, lorries and all this. So Uganda planned a major highway. It begins from the roundabout here at the African Hotel, 8 lanes, to that place at Kiambogo. Then it becomes 6 lanes to... It leaves the old Jinja Road now. No, it leaves Jinja Road and goes to Kinawataka. Kinawataka, there is an interchange also, the third interchange, which there it changes from 6 lanes to 4 lanes, like in the expressway, to that place called Namataba after Mukono. From there, it does not touch the old road. It continues to Jinja. $1.2 billion, they are supposed to do it. They are supposed to commence construction in 2019, commission it in 2022 or 2023, and all of us will be happy ever after. I can tell you the documents for tendering have been submitted about a month ago. It's 10 years later.
Same thing with standard gauge.
Standard gauge, the Kenyans and Tanzanians finished long ago. But I'm happy that we are starting. So, the issue of Uganda and Ramadan, and you confront as PSST, it is not so much the policy design. We have high levels of competence in policy making. It is policy implementation. Project implementation is a very difficult thing. And if you were to ask me to advise the government of Uganda, they need to focus on that. The final one, because it's PSST, like now, the road to Hoima is gone. The road to Fort Portal is gone. The road to Arua is gone. The road to Mutukula is gone. And Museveni's biggest achievement, I think, had been the building of national trunk roads. Let me leave Kampala, where I live, which I think is the worst city. Uganda has had an economy going for 40 years non-stop. And it has, by contemporary and historic standards, a fast-growing economy. How can you have a city like one continuous garbage dump? You go to Kololo, Nakasero, Bugolobi, everywhere, roads are broken beyond any imagination. The contractors are on site, there is no one supervising them. Just
Useless
people.
people just there.
So here is the question: if you are planning massive manufacturing, investment in energy, transmission, and things like that, what are you going to transmit? Isimba is falling apart by the way as a dam, and Karuma cannot hold. Ayogo cannot take off. You may invest a lot in transmission, and you are unable even to produce electricity to carry it.
Okay.
Your roads are falling apart. Right now, as we talk, I don't even know in the Ministry of Finance, they have 1,200 trillion, 1.2 trillion shillings worth of road completion certificates that are not paid. Of those, 750 billion is interest-bearing certificates. We pay 350 million shillings per day as interest on those certificates, which is 117 billion a year, 50 kilometers of a tarmac road. So if you cannot do things like that, how are you going to get this road infrastructure to work into such a level, appalling levels of implementation and efficiency?
Thank you. Let me come to Honorable Mara. Same question. PSST, you look like you want to say something.
You know, Andrew has said a lot of things which are not true.
Let me
But you can ask for
I'm going to come to Honorable Mara. I'll give you the last one.
I'll come and
Honorable
correct
Mara,
you.
Yes.
as a country, Andrew has talked about PDM, but what, and the PSST has talked about infrastructure as one of those things, the mix of energy.
Yeah.
What is our comparative advantage? Where should our money be as a country?
Thank you. I think this has been well explained tonight, is that the Uganda is a very rich country in terms of agriculture, great soils, 2 rainy seasons in a year, very fertile land, young population. And so therefore, if we were to harness that human resource with the capital that we have called land, and we build the value chain and do value addition, what Ramadan calls agro processing, I think we would be able to make a very big change, because that's our competitive advantage, and we also can actually feed the region. Like Kenya, I'm told, I was reading in the social media that the pesticides and insecticides and what they have been using has affected almost 75% of the food that they're eating. So Kenya will very soon be in a crisis, because with Kenya, if you don't use those acaricides or insecticides and fertilizers, you cannot have anything. So our capacity to agro process and export finished products in the country would be something that I would like Ramadan to consider. And that also has been seen in the manner in which government, through UDC, are trying to now have equity holdings in some of the manufacturing entities that suffered during the COVID situation, so that the nascent industries that are processing and adding value in Uganda, we should not allow them to die. Something that I need to mention, Timothy, is you talked about domestic arrears. Actually, the final figure, I think, which Ramadan has given us, the ministry, is about 5 trillion. And I want to thank him for at least raising the budget limit for domestic arrears from 200 billion to now 1.4 trillion. That would go a long way in helping our private sector, who could have borrowed from banks, and some of them are facing foreclosures and so forth. Ramadan, if in due time, post-July, if you could release that money to save our private sector, that would be great. But also I think there is a policy issue which should match with that. Your promise is to clear the domestic arrears in 3 years. But what is happening is that for the companies that have borrowed from banks, the Bank of Uganda guidelines is that after 90 days, this particular facility, the loan must go into lockup. So while we are looking at a 3-year moratorium to pay domestic arrears, Bank of Uganda's policy to banks is that somebody borrows from you, after 90 days is not being able to pay, please lock up and begin to recall on the facility. Most of the business people I'm talking to, they're saying, can you sit down with Bank of Uganda? Since now you are planning to settle those domestic arrears in 3 years, government can actually write a note to banks for the banks to consider not to foreclose on some of these entities. Secondly, the central bank can renew the issues of restructuring loans as they are done during the COVID time, so that people can limp within the 1-2 year period, so that businesses don't die really.
Okay.
Because this is quite something which is very, very, very important for us to consider. So domestic arrears, I thank you for giving good money, but I think it should move with the policy element with Bank of Uganda just to alleviate the heaviness on the business community.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Lastly, Professor, before I give an opportunity to PSST, how do we make taxation attractive, especially for the informal sector? Because, like Daniel said, people don't want to tell you their income, they want to tell you their expenses. How do we make it attractive so that it's cooperative, or we're all pulling together for our country?
Okay, thank you very much, Timothy. I think one way is we should start by really not looking at taxation as the reason people go into business. People go into business to survive. People go into business to innovate. People go into business to event. People go into business because they're excited. Some of them are into the creatives. So there are various reasons why people are providing these services. And I think our relationship with them should not just be to extract a tax. I believe there should be a better relationship with people. First of all, I think as government, there should be an appreciation that all these people who are trying to survive on their own are trying to survive on their own, otherwise they would have been a burden to them. In countries where there are no these opportunities to farm, to do small enterprise and whatever, and people become dependent on the state, they become very unstable. That's where you would hear in the past riots around food, riots around the shelter, riots around many things. But I think with the limited economy and the limited state we've had since the 70s, Ugandans are used at doing things for themselves. That's why they shun all these sayings of Saba government at Yambe. So they are doing something for themselves. I think as economic planners, or those who plan for this economy, the incentive should be, since these people have helped lift themselves and others off our heads as a burden, how do we support them to graduate to something bigger? But what happens is, any small thing, you have a tax obligation. And by the way, it's not wrong to pay tax. It is part of our civic responsibility to pay the tax. The issue is the tax commensurate with what the people are making, okay? So if what the people are making requires a certain tax bracket, that is fine. But you also find that in this country there have been allegations that we actually pay very high tax. I've always said here how VAT in Nigeria is 6% and in Uganda it's 18%. So the two countries can't be competitive. Of course, the reason, the response I always get is that Nigeria has a very big population. So even with 6%, the taxation will be enough. But I think but when you look at Uganda, you have these cycles, people starting and then collapsing back and closing. So how do we make paying tax okay? For starters, I said it's an obligation. It's part of our civic responsibility. But I think for us to enable citizens to do their civic responsibility, there should be support mechanisms. And a lot of the support mechanism, PSST and others have talked about them, creating the right ecosystem, the right environment for these things to thrive. And just maybe on one last point I would want to say, that has been mentioned before. I know when we talk about PDM, the identity of PDM is the money people are given, but that's only pillar 3. PDM has 7 pillars. So probably what we should be asking is how far are we on implementing pillar 1, which is production processing, where actually all this agricultural produce would go into, so that we can actually export. But we cannot export perishables because we don't have much. And I know we have always said Uganda is the food basket of this country, and I know Honorable Mara talked about the Kenyan agriculture suffering, but how do you explain the fact that they're the ones feeding all the goods in our markets? So, so you have a lot of what we are feeding now coming from Kenya, feeding on, coming from Kenya, even when Uganda is supposed to be the food basket. So I think if we actualize PDM Pillar 1, and then it would address most of the concerns people have been raising here, because it produces a bigger economy. But around taxation, more sensitization, but more importantly, more support to make those enterprises survive and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the PSST the last word.
Yes, first to debunk Andrew's misinformation. Andrew, the British you are talking about, how they were having a good strategy on how to make our people commercial oriented through the incentives, left Uganda in 1962 with only 6% of the population in the money economy. A big chunk, almost the entire country of Ugandans were subsisting, except a few coffee growers and the cotton, and there were few, very, very few. Others were working for subsisting on those farms. Now, it is 67% of Ugandans who are in the money economy. We have reduced subsistence to 33%. Where is the magic? Those inefficient things you're talking about, OWC and the PDM now and the MIO. We are making Ugandans, you know, getting oriented in those things. But of course, you would want to see a big bang in terms of the structural change. But that's not how actually transformation happens. Even in those societies, when you look at the UK you are talking about, how did they transform even after they had invented the steam engine? It took nearly 2 centuries for them to move populations.
And robbing the whole world.
Absolutely. And I'm telling you, Uganda is on the right track. If we overcome some of these challenges you are talking about. Secondly, I wanted to inform you that we have paid half of the outstanding certificates you were mentioning. We got money half year.
The UNRWA one, yes.
He approved it in the parliament, and we paid nearly 600 billion, which we are paying. That's true. And the other half, we have budgeted for it. We are going to pay it. And also, we have budgeted for the roads. All of those roads you are mentioning, they are under construction. In Mutukula, the contractor is moving very well. It was one of those key, our trunker roads connecting us to Tanzania, which were being washed away. You know what is happening in Kampala here. We have started a very serious operation on Kampala. It's almost a construction site now in many parts. Actually, many Kampala people are inconvenienced by the constructions which are ongoing. We apologize, but we are going to revamp all of these roads in the city. The other roads, which it was just a matter of, you know, you can't do everything at the same time. We had to phase the construction because also the resources and the capacity of the contractors has to be put into consideration. But now I wanted to inform you that we have given substantial resources to the Ministry of Works and Transport to carry out the construction of the key infrastructure, including the railway, the bridges, and the roads. And then the maintenance. We've been having one policy challenge where we have been concentrating a lot of money under UNRWA on construction, new roads, without allocating money on the maintenance. Now we have put substantial amounts of money on maintenance, as the minister will tell you in the budget. I'm not at liberty to start mentioning what is going to happen, but you're going to see a shift in construction versus maintenance as well, so that we maintain those roads. Some of those roads you are mentioning which are giving away, they are relatively new roads. But because of poor maintenance, look at this expressway. Not the expressway, but before you go to the expressway, the northern bypass had almost collapsed. We are now almost redoing it and convenience. So regular maintenance, we are putting money. Then the feeder roads and those dry weather roads in the countryside, we are also putting resources on them. Therefore, the new agenda under NDP4 is simple. There are 4 areas of the economy which we must put emphasis on. We call them ATMs.
ATMs, yes.
Those ATMs have received about 4.3 trillion shillings to support the private sector, to de-risk them, and they invest in them. The agro industry, the tourism. Tourism, people have been talking about tourism every day. We are going to put a lot of now energy on getting those tourism sites improved, but most importantly on the promotion and marketing of tourism. We have given them the resources. And then highway, all of these highways, we are going to construct those stopovers on the highways, and also ensuring that we improve on the branding of the entire tourism circuit. Then we are doing also now a lot of investment in minerals, the mineral sector, because it's one of the low-lying those hanging fruits, but we haven't been very serious on them.
Yeah.
We are bringing substantial resources so that we get this iron ore out, and we have got some serious investors now coming in, and build also our gold refineries, continue to build them, and a number of other minerals. Oil and gas, you know what's happening. It is in your area, in your neighbors in Bunyoro. What is happening there? We are very serious on it. Then the STI, also ensuring that we invest in innovation. Now, apart from those, then the enablers. There are about 8 of them. We are doing them. The infrastructure I've mentioned. We're also investing in irrigation, about something like 1.2 trillion shillings now in this small scale irrigation. We are, apart from the big irrigation schemes, we are saying our farms are small, we are putting money there. We are investing in capitalizing UDB with about 1 trillion shillings now, so that they can be able to continue to support the private sector. We are putting money in the digital transformation agenda by ensuring that we extend the national broadband so that it can get everywhere, the backbone, and we'll be able to spread the internet and reduce the cost, among others. So what I wanted to end with, therefore, is that despite the challenges we have in implementation, which are real in terms of people
You can mention something on domestic
slow.
areas as well.
Domestic areas we've handled, you have explained it very well. By the way, domestic, somebody was, I think it was the presenter who said, how many trillions? We have
18 trillion.
I needed to put it on record.
Yeah.
The verified areas we are having, including all categories, is 5.32 trillion shillings, and we have allocated already. We paid the Bank of Uganda theirs through issuing a bond to them. We have now allocated on the balance of about, we are going to remain with the balance of about 3.8 trillion when we have paid these ones, we are going to pay, and we want to extinguish the arrears in 3 years by mainly stopping the tap which is bringing in arrears.
The indiscipline.
People committing private sector to supply them when they don't have the money in the budgets.
Okay.
That one, we are stopping it. But most importantly, we are saying, let us support any Ugandan who really is willing to be part of the wealth creation agenda.
Okay.
To the Chegrin of Andrew, who thinks that people should not be supported that way. We are going to support them. And it works, really, because Uganda, why do you think we have food? Why do you think in Uganda we have the dollars when others don't have them? Why do you think in Uganda we are having this entrepreneurial dynamism you see in Uganda? When you go around in other parts of this region, you will not find these things happening. It's because government is deliberate in supporting the wealth creators so that they can be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that's what we are doing.
Thank you. Comment here comes in and says Andrew should be appointed minister. Don't you have enough ranks to be? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for speaking into the issue, especially of our economy. And we'll end it with this quote. I want to thank the production team too for making today possible. A quote by Vanessa Nakate, one of those championing climate. She says, in the end, we cannot eat coal or drink oil. Good morning.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of
whatever progress that was made in the talks. Boris Johnson famously coming in and saying, well, let's just fight. Let's just keep killing people on both sides, and let's just have hundreds of thousands of men killed on the battlefield. Instead of signing that document, instead of working just a little bit more, just taking that a little bit further and ending the bloodshed, ending the conflict. That was also how the former Israeli Prime Minister recalled